Thank you.
Okay, we started in medieval time, but 414. I'm just kidding. That'd be funny if I did the whole thing that fast. So, yes, 400 to 1400 AD, and most of the music that was written that survives today was written in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was the center of power in Europe at the time, and the priests of the monks of the Catholic Church who had taken vows had plenty of time to write, and they were some of the only literate people in society. And so they wrote music, and they wrote music that was in celebration of God. It was often parts of the Bible or parts of the Catholic Mass set to music to help people understand it. And we called that music Gregorian chant, or sometimes it's called plain chant. And the monks would not sign the music because they thought that was taking away from the glory of God. Right? God wrote it. So it was anonymous. So when you answer a question on the listening portion about Gregorian chant, you can just put the monks or some monk dude or leave a blank or put an anonymous or something.
Could you repeat the time period? I think it cut out a little bit when you said that.
Medieval, 100 to 1400.
So 1400 AD or BC, I mean? No, AD.
400 to 1400 AD.
Oh, okay. It cut out again. I'm so sorry about that.
Well, it sounds like your internet's a problem, Elijah.
Probably is.
You know,
I'll take that.
if you just ate life cereal, it'd probably be fine.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'm
I'll
not
have
gonna
you
argue.
know. I'll have you know. I went to Costco the other day. And they had life cereal, and guess what?
What?
About a Costco-sized life cereal.
That's what I'm saying. It's better, isn't it?
Original. Oh, you were hating on Chex, huh?
Yeah, get out of here.
Dang it.
I was eating a life cereal.
Life's good. Chex is good too. So
you screwed yourself there.
Is that the only cereal you like?
No, there's all kinds of good cereals.
Yeah, exactly.
Name.
I'm talking to Elijah. Elijah seems to only like Life.
No,
I think
I'm
he
not
owns
disgusting.
stock in Life. I think his family created Life 4 generations ago.
Yeah, no, we are the Quaker Oat family.
Okay. The Gregorian chant of the medieval time period was monophonic or homophonic. It was vocal. It was sacred. And yeah, there you go. That's what you need to know about the medieval time period. Renaissance, 1400, 1600. We see the most important thing to remember about the Renaissance is we have the invention of polyphony. And many music historians considered that to be like the most important thing that happened in the history of music, is polyphony was invented. Polyphony means having multiple melodies happening at the same time. The master of polyphony that we talked about was Palestrina, and we specifically listened to his Missa Papae Marcelli, which is Mass for Pocus. And it was polyphonic, it was vocal, it was sacred, and yeah, that's an important piece in history of music. We talked about Gabrielli, who was another writer of polyphonic works. He wrote instrumental works, though, and he wrote a lot of secular works. And so we listened to some of his instrumental secular works. And Gabrielli is particularly important because a lot of students would come to Italy from other parts of Europe, and particularly Germany, and then they would bring his music back. And so the next several generations of musicians would study a lot of Gabrielli. He was well known throughout Europe, including folks like Bach. So there you go, Gabrielli. And then Gesualdo was the other gentleman we talked about from the Renaissance. That was the dude that killed his wife, and he used stone painting, right? So when he said Moro Lasso, the music would reflect, Moro meaning death. The music would get spooky, reflect the word, and he was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. is next, 1600, 1750. The big thing with the Baroque is the invention of opera. Opera is a big deal. We listened to the English opera Dido and Aeneas by Henry Purcell. We talked about Vivaldi, and another big thing in the Baroque is the invention of the concerto. And Vivaldi wrote a bunch of concertos. We listened to his most famous set of concertos called the Four Seasons, specifically the first movement of the Winter Concerto. And then we talked about Handel, George Frederick Handel. And we listened to his oratorio, the Messiah oratorio is another important musical form from the Baroque because it was like opera light, right? When the church said you can't have opera all the time because it was so popular during Lent, that they invented this sort of more religious version of opera that they were allowed to do all the time, called the oratorio. That takes us to, and then Bach, the great master. His death marks the end of the Baroque time period. So that shows you he was a really significant guy. He is a master at counterpoint, at polyphony, at having these multiple melodies things. In fact, he was so good at it that no one's really even tried since he died to do what he did. He was the dude at that. He had a ton of masterpieces. You want to focus for the listening portion on his cello suite, first cello suite, movement number 1, the prelude. Pretty stuff. La da dee do dee do dee do, la da dee do dee do dee do, la da dee do dee do dee do. There you go. Exactly. That takes us to the classical period, 1750, 1820. 3 dudes really define the classical time period, and we call them collectively the First Viennese School. There are 3 living at this rough same time, living in Vienna or near Vienna, writing in a similar style. They are Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. Haydn was the eldest of the 3. Franz Joseph Haydn. He was the friend and mentor to Mozart, and he was a teacher to Beethoven. He was just removed enough from the musical scene, working for the Prince Esterhazy, that he had to kind of figure stuff out on his own. Excuse me. Is it rude to yawn on mic? I don't know. I don't know what the mic etiquette is. I moved off mic to yawn for you. I felt like
just ASMR, dude.
Oh yeah.
Doing anything in the mic besides talking is probably not good.
Okay, gotcha. I'm gonna do the rest of the lecture ASMR style.
Yeah.
Please don't. Please don't. Love God, don't. The love of all things holy and sacred. Please don't.
I saw one the other day on YouTube that was like somebody opening up a bag of chips. I was like, what is wrong with people? Okay, sorry. What are we talking about? Classical era. Classical, see? 1750, 1820. Haydn, often called the father of the symphony and the string quartet, because he kind of innovated those forms. We listened to his Surprise Symphony number 94. Mozart is next. We talked about he was a child prodigy. He and his sister toured Europe, selling out concert halls, playing for kings and queens. He wrote a bunch of stuff, died early. His Requiem is the thing you want to focus on listening wise. I moved off mic to yawn. Beethoven was the youngest of the 3. His Symphony number 3 is what I think we should focus on listening wise. But we talked about how he greatly expanded Sonata Allegro form, wrote more dramatic, more emotional melodies, and intensified the symphony generally, and so much so that he's considered the person who catalyzed the beginning of the Romantic era. So technically Beethoven is both a classical and a Romantic composer, which takes us to the Romantic era, 1820, 1911. We had a few different lectures on the Romantic. We had one on the early Romantic composers. We talked about Berlioz, Chopin, and Brahms. Berlioz wrote Symphonie Fantastique. Remember the program music, so the story of the boy falling in love with a girl and she doesn't like back, and he goes to a dance and she's there, and then he goes to the countryside and then he kills her, and then he gets arrested, and then he gets beheaded, and then he's at his own funeral. That's all the story of Symphonie Fantastique. Remember the Idée fixe. That's an important part of Berlioz and the Symphonie Fantastique. This recurring melody that represents her that changes over time. Chopin wrote the great piano stuff. We listened to his prelude in E minor. You want to focus on that. Brahms was considered sort of the heir apparent to Beethoven in a lot of ways, in his Symphony No. 1, which he was really nervous to write, was well received and called Beethoven's 10th, which was high praise from the critics in Vienna. We did a lecture on Tchaikovsky and Puccini. We talked about Tchaikovsky had a complicated personal life. He was gay. He was not obviously publicly gay because that would have been illegal at the time. Married. His marriage was a disaster. It didn't work. He had this patroness, Nadia Vanek, who he exchanged these really passionate letters with. They never met in person. Very interesting dude. And then we listened to his Fifth Symphony and his Sixth Symphony. The first one of his Sixth Symphony is what you guys ended up wanting to get tested on. It's the very sad one. He conducts the premiere of his Sixth Symphony, and then 9 days later he's dead. He's dead of cholera, but there's a lot of speculation that he may have purposefully ingested water, and so a lot of mystery around his Sixth Symphony and the circumstances of his death. Puccini, we listened to La Boheme, that beautiful aria from La Boheme where Pavarotti is singing and flirting with the girl. Remember, he's telling her, I'm rich in poems and love songs, but I'm poor in like money. Remember he said that? And then he said, but my treasure was stolen by a beautiful pair of eyes that arrived here just now with you. Remember all this?
Instantly the scum meter went off. Like, that's danger zone.
When he said he didn't have any money? Or when he said he was rich in poems and love songs? Which part?
Yeah. Anytime someone's like, oh, I don't have much going on, but I've got a big heart. It's like, no, you don't. There's no way.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's rough. Yikes.
If you say my only skills are being dramatic, then that's not a skill.
And she was vacuuming. Yeah.
Well, that's
I think it's pretty intense language, and I think people tend to have pretty intense reactions to it one way or another. People either find it icky and gross, or they find it terribly romantic.
Or
And
neither.
I think both of those responses are legitimate. It just depends on your personality. Anyways, then we talked about Mahler. Oh, well, we talked about Wagner and Debussy, too. We had a Wagner Debussy lecture. Wagner is annoyingly important to the history of music. I was just doing some more research on him for my book that I'm writing, and gosh, his operas were so important and so successful, and he did he learned so fast. He really was this genius, but he was such a bad person. My God, he was such a bad dude. He was so racist and anti-Semitic and arrogant. My God, was this guy arrogant. So I don't know, trippy dude to think about. Debussy was the French master. He was a rebel, rejected all of his teaching, but was a genius and won all these awards. He is technically, don't think of him as a romantic composer. He's an impressionist, but I don't think his stuff shows up on the final, so I think you're safe with him. And then that takes us to Mahler. When we talk about Mahler's very, very diverse life, he was born Jewish but converted to Christianity. He was born sort of born a bohemian, which to put into context is like kind of hippie-ish lifestyle. But he becomes the conductor of the Vienna Opera Orchestra, which is sort of the most official, formal, laced-up part of society. He was a world-renowned opera conductor who never composed an opera, but composed a bunch of symphonies and never conducted symphonies, except for rare occasions. His life was just filled with all these really interesting dichotomies, and he seemed to be an incredibly intuitive force. He kind of foreshadowed his own death. He was married to a woman who was incredibly talented in her own right, and he became paranoid that she was cheating on him, and she was in fact cheating on him massively. He had therapy with Freud. A really, really interesting life. And also, I think what's interesting, what's so compelling about Mahler is his music was so unappreciated for so long. So during his own lifetime, the reception to his music was pretty mild. Some people thought it was great. Some people thought it was way over the top. It was way too long. It was way too emotional. It was way too dramatic. So it didn't get performed a ton. And then when the Nazis took power, because he was Jewish and converted to Christianity, they considered him Jewish. That was too Jewish for them. So his music was banned in his home countries. Everywhere that would have been sort of a natural place to champion his music wasn't allowed to play it for several decades. And then even after the Nazis weren't in power anymore, there was still this lingering kind of like sense that his music was inferior. And Leonard Bernstein led this revival of his music, and now his music is some of the most performed and beloved. I know anytime the symphony does a Mahler symphony, I get all excited. I go ooh, and I drive down there and I see it. They did Mahler 5 last year. It was very good. So we listened to his second symphony, which is subtitled "The Resurrection Symphony," and it is such a wonderful piece of music. I hope you listen to it. We listened to the very end of that, which is a long piece. I'm gonna go and mute Elijah because I can hear him typing, and it's pretty cool. So it's funny. I'm gonna mute you again. We get to the 20th century, and we revisit the century from several different perspectives. So we start with the second Viennese avant-garde perspective, which are the folks who essentially looked at what Wagner did. Wagner pushed tonality to a breaking point. He really started to play with tonality and stretch it, and almost break it, but he never fully did break it. And they decide, let's break it. No more tonal center, no more scale forms, no more of the traditional music that we're used to listening to. We're going to write this very, very new music, no tonal center. The second Viennese school was Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern. Schoenberg was the eldest of the three. He taught Berg and Webern. He wrote the piece for the listening you want to focus on is Pierre Lunaire. That was the first atonal piece written. Berg, we listened to his violin concerto, and Webern, we listened to his symphony, which is a very short piece. The next generation after them, the avant-garde, take things even further and even crazier. And so you see, whereas the second Viennese school challenged the fundamental notion of why do we need a pitch center in music, we see the next generation of the avant-garde say, why do we need beginning, middle, and end in music? Why does music have to exist in time? Why does music have to have sound? Why does music have to, why can't it be recorded birds? Why can't there be 43 notes in an octave? All these different ways of challenging and revising and rethinking music that happened during the avant-garde. We listened to a bunch of folks: John Cage, Stockhausen, George Crumb, Harry Parch, Luciano Berio. I'm leaving someone out, but the one that really focuses John Cage, who was kind of the lead of the group, and his most known piece, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which you're gonna have a moment on the listening portion where you click the play button and you realize that it's been going for several seconds and it's still going, it's moving. Trust your instinct. Those of you who've studied will know what's happening. Those of you who don't will be like, well, it's broken. It's not broken. If the thing's moving, you'll hopefully get it. Okay. Then we went back and revisited 20th century from the point of view of tonal composers. Started with Stravinsky. We listened to his nationalist ballets, the first three major works that he wrote: Firebird, Petrushka, and Rite of Spring. Rite of Spring is the most important of the three for sure. You want to focus. You want to make sure you understand that piece, both for the written portion and the listening portion. Why was it revolutionary? Why was it so important? And make sure you know what it sounds like. Rite of Spring is a big piece in the history of music. We listened to Shostakovich. We listened to his Fifth Symphony. He talks about Stalin and the relationship they had and how complicated things got there. Then we listened to the Minimalists, which takes us up to the current day. And the piece we focused on for the listening portion of the Minimalist was Terry Riley's In C. Then we went back, we talked about American music and how early American music was really just other countries' music that we stole and changed the lyrics to, until Stephen Foster comes along and we start to have some kind of folk tradition. And then Jeanette Thurber helps the American Conservatory get launched, and Dvorak comes over. Dvorak spends 3 years helping train American musicians, which was really important for us. And then the next generation, we start to see some American composers show up. So we see, we talked about Gershwin and Copeland and how important they were to American music. Gershwin died very young, you remember, of a brain tumor, but we listened to his Porgy and Bess. We listened to a song called Summertime from his opera Porgy and Bess, which was his masterpiece he wrote at the end of his life. And Copeland, who is often called the Dean of American music, we listened to his Appalachian Spring, which is a ballet he wrote for Martha Graham. Specifically, the song from Appalachian Spring is Simple Gifts from Appalachian Spring. Then the very last couple lectures we did, we talked about the history of jazz and the history of pop music, which kind of takes us through the 20th century again. I think it's really important you understand you don't have whatever kind of pop music you like today without jazz. So you can literally trace back whether it's rock and roll, hip hop, R&B, EDM, bluegrass, straight up pop, whatever it is, you can trace it back to jazz. And it's important to understand that jazz is like the ancestor of the music you love. And it should be respected, man. We talked quickly about 4 jazz artists, 1 sort of pre-jazz artist, actually, and 3 jazz artists. We talked about Scott Joplin, the ragtime composer. We listened to Maple Leaf Rag. We talked about Louis Armstrong. We listened to When the Saints Come Marching In, that structure of jazz where you have the head, the improv section, and the head again. We listened to Duke Ellington's Take the A Train, and then Miles Davis' So What. And then we very, very briefly talked about music with rock and roll. We listened to Beatles. We saw your grandparents freak out on the Ed Sullivan Show. And then we listened to Aretha Franklin, Respect. And then we listened to some Tupac.
No, you didn't.
Dear Mama. And that takes us through the class. That's all the stuff you might need to know. Do you have any questions? Nobody has any questions.
I got a question, but it's kind of about exam 2.
Okay. Whatever you got.
So
man.
in the
I'm open to it.
in the grade book, it shows like when I submitted it, it graded the parts that were like, you know, like an answer that it could grade, but then there were, you know, the longer like paragraph ones that
Yeah.
it didn't grade because you need to grade those, I guess, and I haven't gotten a grade on that yet. So I was wondering if you're
Sure. Yeah, I
still
can
working on
fix
those.
that. Yeah. I'll pull that up right now as soon as we're done.
Ethan Cook also texted me and asked if I got my grade for it, and he said he hasn't gotten graded on his yet.
On test 2?
Yeah, me either.
That's the written.
Okay.
The written
Yeah,
stuff.
me neither. I think I didn't get the grade yet.
All right.
Mhm.
Gosh,
In here.
I don't know. It's weird. I'm looking at the grade book and everybody except for like 2 people has a score. So I wonder if it's because you took it a second time. I'll go through and
Well, I only took it once.
Yeah, me too.
well, I don't know. I'll make sure it's fixed.
You know, it
Okay.
was for the other class.
You don't have to yell at me. Sorry.
It shows a grade for my listening questions. I got 108 out of 100, and then on the written questions it says 27 out of 125.
27 out of 125 is not.
Yeah, I
not as
had the
good.
same.
108 out of 100 is pretty good, and then 27 out of 125 not as good.
That's not great, but I mean, you know,
Lower
there you go.
percentage. Yeah, I'll
It doesn't
make
even show the percentage though, which is weird.
well, because it's probably recognizing that it's not done giving you points yet. But I'll make sure it's a little bit weird on my end, but I'll make sure you guys. I can override it if nothing else, and just make it give you a score. So I'll make
Okay,
sure
cool,
you
thank
have
you.
clean scores in there by. I'll try and do that by the end of today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, you guys know me well enough. I'm not gonna like cheat you on your grades. You know, if anything, I'll give you extra points. Any other questions?
I have a question about exam 3 for the written part. So I noticed that we only have 30 minutes, and for exam 2 we had, I think, like 50 minutes for the written part. So I wonder if it's like shorter than the other one.
It is a little bit shorter. I was trying to remember how long I gave you on exam 2. I'm just worried about cheating. I'm worried people are
Oh,
gonna,
okay.
because
Okay.
I know if I give you too much time, then you can literally just Google stuff, you know. And I can tell you not to do that, and I know you won't do that, Raha, because you're a good person. But
Thank you.
think of some of the other folks. Let me know if that really isn't enough time. I can.
Yeah, I was just nervous if it's not going to be like enough time to write like the essay parts of it. So
Yeah. Let me know. If it's not, I can extend the time.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And remember, you do get 2 attempts at it. So if the first one doesn't go well, you know, you can easily take some notes and then use that the second time.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Are you also going to give us more time on the final, since it's going to be like?
Yeah, the final you'll have more time for sure. All right then.
I have another question that's kind of not related to this class.
That's okay. Do it. Do it live.
Do you teach history of jazz?
I do not.
Ah.
I'm not really
Who
qualified.
does
I
teach
could.
it?
I've been asked to a couple times, but I feel like strongly about like you should only teach stuff you're really qualified for. I've played a lot of silly jazz in brass quintets, but I'm not at all like I don't know the standards that well. I play tuba, so I don't get to play real jazz very often.
Right.
But
Who does teach it?
I know Dr. Smith has taught it. I think Amy Hacker has taught it. and there's another person I can't remember. We have a person who doesn't live in town who teaches in our department. So figure that out. I don't understand how that works, but so I've like literally never met this person, but he teaches online, like 3 classes a semester. So I think he teaches it too.
Groovy.
I feel like I was lied to. I thought we were